And Tony's back with us once again. Good morning, welcome back.
Well, thank you very much.
This is, what, how many now?
That's 11 of that particular bunch of Navajo tribal police books. Yeah.
Right. Do they get easier as they get greater in number?
No, you think they would. You think you'd learn, but each one seems to be a real problem. You know, you start out with a wonderful idea, and it's going to be the world's greatest book, and the longer you write, the more disappointing it gets, and finally you finish it, and it takes you about 2 years to get over the...
So you're still getting over, what, 2 books ago, right?
I'm beginning to like the one I finished about 2 back.
When you hand this in, then, do you sort of give it to your publishers like, well, okay, here it is?
Yeah, and I think he's going to reject it. So
not a chance.
Turns out they don't, but it's always a great relief when he calls me and says it's all right.
What's the significance of the title? Coyote is not just an animal, but it's an idea in this book.
It really is, and we tend to, a lot of people tend to use coyote to think the Native Americans use him as a symbol for sort of a jokester and a trickster, and some tribes do, but the Navajos use him as a symbol for malice and, you know, malicious fate, sort of Shakespearean notion of don't count on anything, really, because things will go wrong. You know, the Murphy's Law is out there.
Yeah, and the coyote will have things the way he wants them.
Coyote is always hungry, they say.
In this story, Lee Porn and she are back together again, trying to solve the murder of a fellow police officer.
Right.
And an old Navajo alcoholic is picked up as one of the prime suspects. How much do you have to worry about treating the Navajo culture with the kind of respect that they now expect and your readers have come to expect from your books?
I really don't have to worry about it at all, because the respect is natural with me. They're great people, and I've been it's a sort of a mutual friendship that's gone on for years. I grew up with Indians and
out in Oklahoma.
Yeah, different sorts, but still, you know, they were my friends as a boy, and I identify with them, and it's us and them, and I identify with the Potawatomis and Seminoles and Navajos.
Would your stories be as interesting if you didn't set them against the Indian backdrop? Just any old detective story?
I don't know. I doubt it. I'm not sure I'd write them without that backdrop. That's sort of what I'm into. I like to get everybody interested in this culture, because I think it's important and valuable, and it's a shame that we're so ignorant of it.
Yeah, I mean, because your books are really one of the few ways today, short of visiting, to learn a whole lot about the Navajo culture.
Unless you want to do it the hard way, which is go to the library and check out those heavy...
And unfortunately, people just don't want to do that anymore.
People don't do that, no. It is, well, I think maybe I encourage some of them to.
Is that a secret mission of yours?
A little bit, yeah. Not really secret. I talk about it quite a bit. I'd like to sort of make a dent in this ignorance.
Working with the Indian, the backdrop as you do you find now that ideas are being given to you after 11 of these books? You don't have to look for ideas anymore.
I do. I get suggestions from Navajos I know. They'll say, how about this? And in fact, they help me with not to make mistakes. I had a subplot. I thought it was a great idea, and I mentioned it to a Navajo. What do you think? I said, would this still work? And he said, golly, I don't know. And he was a teacher.
Right.
He said, I'll give it to my 11th grade English class. And he did. He made them write a little essay about it. And every one of them wrote back and agreed that it was a bad idea. See?
Well, with the wisdom of 11th graders has come number 11, and we'll look forward to number 12. Tony, good seeing you again.
Well, thank you very much.
Lots of luck. We'll be back in just a moment. In a moment, Mike Leonard will go shopping here in New York City, takes a wrong turn, ends up in a real expensive place. And in our
not a story.
Here's a book he and I are
working on together. In fact, it's about, I guess it's finished now.
No, we're waiting for this book.
It's his photographs and my text.
Oh my word.
Well, this is a lot of this uncorrected, but this is
Oh, that's
going to be a pretty book. Here's
yes, it is.
the
Oh,
We're going to be going
Hillerman
out there
Country.
in a few
Mine
days.
went that
Gosh,
way.
that's-
Oh, that's great. Well, we're waiting for that book. I do have to tell you that Mr. Welge and I have read all of your books.
oh,
We are great fans, and
incidentally, that top row is one copy of each edition.
Oh really?
They're in 15 languages.
Oh my
So
that was
some
one,
of them are in 15.
that's one of the questions I'm going to ask, because I wasn't aware that you were published so widely in Europe, I mean, around the world.
Well, there was a time when I was much better known in France than I was in Oklahoma. You couldn't find one of my books in Oklahoma.
That's odd, but not surprising. You know, sometimes we're slow. Okay, are you ready? Okay, is it on? Okay, good. To be sure that you can hear me well, I'm going to give a brief introduction. We are in Albuquerque, New Mexico. This is May the 20th, and we are 1991, and we are here at the home of Mr. Tony Hillerman, a fellow Oklahoman and a very prominent gentleman in the literary world and the journalistic world, and just he is quite accomplished in many, many areas. My name is Judith Mitchner, and I'm here with Mr. Bill Welge, the director of the Oklahoma Historical Society Archives Division, and we are interviewing Mr. Hillerman for the Oklahoma Historical Society Oral History Program. Thank you, Mr. Hillerman, for letting us come. You're
Pleased
very
to have
kind. I would just like to ask you a few questions. First of all, we know that you are from Oklahoma, and we know you're from the Sacred Heart area. Would you give me please your birth date when you were born?
Born May 27th, 1925, in Sacred Heart.
Okay.
Downtown Sacred Heart.
Downtown Sacred Heart, yeah. And what's your father's name?
His name was August Alfred Hillerman.
August Alfred Hillerman. And your mother?
Lucy Grove Hillerman.
Lucy Grove Hillerman. And what was your father's occupation? What did he do?
He was he'd been a cowboy. He had taught school in Texas. He had shoed. He was a farrier in the coal mines at Colgate. He and his brother Tony had opened a store at Violet, Oklahoma, and apparently went bankrupt or lost it somehow. Then he came to Sacred Heart. He started he farmed there and started a filling station and store with a brother-in-law, Frank Bartholomew, I guess is how you pronounce it. Eventually became postmaster at Sacred Heart. But mostly we farmed. Well, I don't know what you say mostly. We had a farm.
Where did he come from originally?
He came from Missouri. But as a boy, as a very young man, he moved south looking for, looking for cheaper land or something.
Missouri, is that where your grandparents, his parents were? Is that where his family was? Or did
Yeah.
he come there? Oh,
No, that's where his family was.
okay. And what about your mother?
My mother was born. Her father and mother were moving toward Oklahoma Territory from Nebraska, and my mother was born. I believe my grandmother died in bearing my mother, and died shortly after my mother
In
was born.
childbirth.
So my mother arrived in the Sacred Heart area as an infant, was farmed out. Her father had older daughters and sons, but no one to take care of her. So she was sort of farmed out to the Kuster-Steffen family, I believe it was, who raised her till she was about 3 or 4 years old. And so she came back to the Grove family speaking only German. She went away to, when she became a teenager, went to Missouri and studied nursing. Her older sister was superintendent of nursing for the Franciscans, who ran a nursing school. Her older sister became a nurse. She went back to Missouri, became a nurse, was a Red Cross nurse in World War I. Then she and my father, when she met, my father was a widower. His first wife had died. And they met, I don't know the circumstances, were married and lived at Sacred Heart.
I had a question went right out of my head. How many brothers and sisters do you have?
I have an older sister, Margaret Mary, who lives in San Martin, California, and an older brother, Barney, who's a photographer in Oklahoma City.
Your family primarily is German, isn't it? I mean, you have a lot of German blood in your family.
My father's family was German. My mother's family was English.
And she was speaking German.
Well, she was speaking German because, you learn your language from your environment, not genetically. And she was raised by a family that spoke German. But her mother and father both were English.
That's very interesting. When did the first Hillerman come over here to this country?
I don't know, really. That's just a funny thing. I got a call a while back from John Hillerman, who's you see
Yes,
him
John,
on, the actor. He was doing a movie in Germany, and he called me and he said, we never met, but he called me and said, Tony said, I've got a problem. He said, I've never known hardly anything about my family background, and over here in Germany, with a German name, everybody expects you, and they don't understand. They know their family back to the 17th generation. What can you tell me? And I said, John, all I can tell you is very vague, because my dad died when I was a teenager, see, and you're not interested in your family when you're 15 years old. And but I had a vague notion that the Hillermans came from East Prussia, that they were sort of socialist, pacifist radicals, that Frederick the Great either chased them out or they fled and moved to Missouri eventually, and that's about all I know. And I'm not even sure about that, see? Now, my older sister, who was old enough to have some sense before, my dad died and so forth, probably knows quite a bit more.
About the family.
Yeah, in fact, I know she does. And she's gone to England and visited my mother's relatives.
We know you went to Sacred Heart. I read a little bit about your
To
background.
the school,
Yeah, to St. Mary's.
St. Mary's Academy.
In the Smithsonian article on you.
There were two schools at Sacred Heart. There was Georgetown School, which was, the building's still there, a stone building, 2 rooms as I recall, had a pump outside, might have had a cistern. Anyway, I think it had only one teacher who taught the first 8 grades, as I recall. I might be wrong, maybe they had 2. But my father, who was had an unorthodox education. My mother had gone through nurse's training. My dad apparently had very little primary education, but had gone to college, sort of self-educated. But he read. I mean, he was very well read, and he didn't think the teacher at Georgetown was very competent, and neither did my mother. and we were Roman Catholics, of course, and so anyway, the Sisters of Mercy who ran the school opened it to, even though it was a boarding school for girls, and there for the Potawatomis, they opened it and let us farm boys from around there attend as day students. So I spent my first 8 grades.
Was that sort of like a subscription? I mean, did they charge you all
Yeah,
to
we
go?
paid. I'm sure it wasn't much, but we paid.
How long did you go to?
First 8 grades,
First 8 grades. Where did you go to high school?
Commonwealth.
Okay, and you graduated from there. Where did your father go to college?
I don't know. Someplace back in the Midwest.
Just curious.
Yeah, I don't know either. It's strange how little you know. He never talked about himself. He died of a kind of a progressive heart ailment that made him almost an invalid in his later years as it developed. And he was one of these guys that works 7 days a week, and even when he was sick, he worked all the time. So you really didn't get acquainted when you're as young as I was with your father and those circumstances.
What did you do after you graduated high school?
The war was on. My brother was about to go in, was going to go into the service pretty quick. We had a little meeting. We farmed the first summer. My father was dead, and my brother and I was running the farm.
What did you all raise on that farm?
We raised alfalfa. We raised a lot of different kind of fruit. My dad was always trying to find a way to make a living in a country where nobody really could make a living. So we raised grapes, we raised blackberries, we raised strawberries, we raised various kind of fruit. We raised Herefords. Oh, we didn't have many because we didn't have much land. And then we raised some corn and standard crops, peanuts, no cotton. Anyway, then. After the year after my dad died, well, Barney and I thought we were smarter than he was. We'd raise cotton, and of course we had the same lot of people who tried to grow cotton. Usually, we had wonderful cotton, and then here came our luck with army worms. They just wiped us out. Anyway, the year after I graduated, that fall we had a kind of a meeting. My mother and brother and I, we decided that somebody ought to go to college, and I'd been a more enthusiastic student than my brother. I guess that was the reason, or perhaps it was the fact that I graduated from high school at 16, and maybe the fact that he was he would be drafted so quickly. We decided it should be me, and we had enough money to pay one semester's tuition, and 1 month's boarding house, 1 month's room rent, and to buy most of my books. We went up to Oklahoma State, and people in Conoway nobody here in Conoway in those days ever went to college. College had already started. So I went to an faculty advisor, and he said, "What kind of grades you make in math?" And I told him A's. And I thought I wanted to be, I didn't know what an engineer did, but I thought I wanted to be an engineer. I'd heard of it. So he didn't ask me what math courses I'd taken, which was, all Econo offered in those days was 1 semester of plain geometry and 1 semester of algebra, beginning algebra, taught by a football coach who didn't understand either one of them. And so we never really studied algebra or geometry. We just horsed around, studied football plays. Anyway, I got a job we found a room, it was an old condemned house that was going to be torn down, and this widow had it, and she was renting rooms. I got half of a room, half of a bed. I slept with a old boy from Oklahoma City class named Bean, James Bean. He and I had this room so small that when we decided to turn the bed around, we had to take it down. The room was only about 3 inches wider than the bed was long. Anyway, I got a job as a dishwasher for a boarding house. I got a job as a housekeeper for a dentist in Stillwater. And I got a job as a swamper for the ROTC, you know, the putting
Yes,
stuff
uh-huh.
back after they. And I got a job as a ditch cleaner for the Aggie farm. So I had 4 jobs, which was, the pay was 35 cents an hour those days.
Gosh.
And the deal was I was needed to make enough money in the first semester to pay my tuition in the second semester. I was not going to make it financially. I wasn't going to be able to make it to save that much money. But also I think I was flunking out anyway. I think I would have flunked out. I got into a college algebra course where it was just absolutely as if a Watusi had walked into a Greek literature class. Language I just didn't understand. Then the guy also put me in a trigonometry class, which cannot take until you've completed college algebra. I made all A's in trig in the first half of trig, where it was all memorizing all the rules. I can memorize anything I could. Then we started applying it with algebra, and I made solid F's. And the teaching instructor, young guy, called me and said, "What the hell happened to you? You know, you were all A's and now you're all F's." And I said, "Don't understand the algebra." He said, "Well, what kind of grade did you make in college algebra?" I said, I'm taking it right now, but the instructor told me to withdraw because I'm not prepared for it." He said, "Hell, you can't take this course till you finish that." He said, "Well, the way the system works," he said, "though, we average it out." He said, and you've got enough A's already so that if you don't find a way to make something below an F, you'll average out with a passing grade. So I think I made a D in trig and an F in algebra and a very bad grade in chemistry, which also requires math, and an A in English and an A in something else. But I probably would have been a flunk out.
How long did you go to Oklahoma State?
Went to 1 semester, and then my brother was drafted. I came home to run the farm and I wanted to get in the service so badly. I was afraid I was going to be over before I got it, And I was draft proof because I was the only remaining son of a farmer and a widow, see. But my mother was very understanding, and so she waived the exemption and let me go. So I sold the cattle. We had a big auction and sold off. We didn't have enough money for a tractor. We had a team of horses, and we sold our horses. Sold out. Locked the place up, and my mother moved up to Oklahoma City and got a job as working in a room where they sterilize equipment in the hospital, and lived in a rooming house up there in Oklahoma City.
When did you go into the military?
In the summer of '43.
And which branch did you go into?
Went into they put me first in something called the Army Specialized Training Program. If you made really high grades on your entrance exam, they screened you out and they put you in this. They sent you back to college. I don't know. Army was. I don't know what the theory behind it was, but they did it. And then after I started getting heavy casualties in Europe and in Asia, in the Pacific, they thought it wasn't such a hot idea. But anyway, they sent me back. They put me through infantry basic training. Then they sent me back to Oklahoma State University. But after about 3 months or a couple of months of that, they decided that wasn't, they eliminated ASTP and they put us all in the infantry, back in the infantry, which was the branch I served.
And how long were you in the military, in the Army?
A little over 2 years.
And where did you serve?
Served in France and a little bit in Germany.
I know that you did sustain a serious wound when you were.
Yeah.
in the military. Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, the Army was operating at its usual level of efficiency. And somebody decided they wanted to, we were in in Alsace, near in the hill country before you get into the Rhineland. And somebody, who you never knew who or why, decided to raid this little town, Nefer, in a town about the size of Sacred Heart, a little bitty farm town. Capture the little town, and then hold it, and then return to American lines before daylight. And anyway, apparently, I don't know, they planned it for one day and then they postponed it for the next day. And the Germans seemed to have a way of catching on to stuff like that. They sent a reinforced platoon after dark we waited across the, well, to make a long story short, about 40 men, they split us into two. My detachment waded across this Mirth River, which was shallow, and came around the back, and the other group went in the front, and it was an absolute turkey shoot. I think out of the 40 men, we had 33 casualties.
Oh, my word. Oh.
I don't think we gave a German a bad scare. Heavily mined, and it was just really absolute stupidity. And I don't know for sure what wounded me. It was either a hand grenade or one of these little shoe mines, they call them. I'm not sure which was. Anyway, it broke my legs and my foot, and blinded me for a period of about 6 weeks. Had a lot of facial burns.
I know that Charlie said that you, during that time, that you were not sure whether you were ever going to see again.
Yeah, they were going to take out my left eye, and then they decided somebody had invented penicillin, and they decided to experiment with penicillin, and they stopped the infection. For a long time, as I say, for several weeks, I couldn't see, but when I could see again, they told me then that because of scarring on the eyes, I probably wouldn't be able to see well enough to read, except big stuff. But gradually the scar tissue was absorbed more and more, and now I have, my left eye is still not very good. I can just see shapes, but my right eye is the scar is what's left of it is away from the lens.
Oh, that's good.
It's my understanding that at that point of when you were wounded, that you, or before you were wounded, you received a medal for either valor or bravery in helping another soldier to safety.
No, that was, I got two. One of them was a Bronze Star for 8 of us went on a daylight patrol into a little town. They wanted to find out if the Germans had withdrawn from this town, and so they sent a patrol in daylight into it, and I was one of the guys who went on patrol. It was a voluntary deal, and we captured a couple of prisoners, 3 prisoners, I guess. Anyway, but everybody went on our patrol was run a Bronze Star. And then I got a Silver Star for another fiasco. The Germans had, it was in the Rhineland, very near the Rhine River. We were trying to capture a town where, Sessenheim, where I think Goethe lived there, or had lived, Poland. And we were, my battalion had been detached and attached to another division that was involved in this attack. The other division withdrew after getting its nose bloody, and nobody told us. U.S. Army at its operating efficiency. And so we were Germans counterattacked, and they chased us out of this area where we were dug in. And in this process, I was told to go down this little blacktop, heavily wooded little blacktop road, and to make sure the Germans didn't cross it, and cut us off, and I did that, and later on I got a Silver Star for that.
You said you got 2 awards. What was the other one?
First one was for that patrol, the Bronze Star, and the second one was
The Silver Star.
Silver Star. And of course the Purple Heart for getting blown up. That's the easy one to get.
Now, where from all of this did you get into journalism and writing? And I realize that's a large gap, but I'm trying.
Well, it's not so large as you think. I had one of my best friends in Sacred Heart was a guy named Larry Grove, who later became the Poor Larry's Almanac on the Dallas News for years. They lived on about 2 miles from us. They had a farm. And Larry and I both loved to read, and he had this dream of being an MD, being a doctor, and a surgeon is what he wanted to be. So he got in the Marine Corps, and he got part of his hand blown off, and his right hand, and his wrist mangled on Okinawa. A mortar shell landed. He was in a foxhole with his compadre, and one of these knee mortar shells landed on the helmet of the other Marine, and of course decapitated him. And my cousin was partly out of the hole trying to reach some telephone lines that had been cut and patch them back together again. And the shrapnel hit him in his arm. Anyway, so when I got back from overseas, he was just back he was in the Navy hospital at Norman, and I went to see him, and I said, Grove, you're obviously not going to be a surgeon anymore. What are you going to do with yourself? And now, of course, here came the GI Bill, which is the greatest thing that ever happened to poor people in the United States. He said, hell, he didn't know. And I had a woman named, I know her name is well known, but I can't think of it. Reporter, feature writer in the Daily Oklahoma, had written a feature about me when I was wounded, and about me getting this Silver Star. See, and she told my mother had given her my letters, and she told my mother she'd like to see me when I got back. So I didn't have anything. I didn't know a soul in Oklahoma City except my mother. Her name almost came to me. So I went to see her, and she told me I should be a writer.
Wasn't Edith Johnson, was it?
No. And I couldn't be, obviously I didn't want to go in any chem. I couldn't see very well yet. So I knew I wasn't going to go, chemical engineering is what I thought I wanted to be, and I knew I wasn't going to mess around with chemistry, and I wasn't any good at math anyway. I was smart enough to know I wasn't going to have anything to do with mathematics. So I thought, well, why not? And so I told Larry this, and he said, okay, why don't we'll both be writers. So when he got out of the Navy hospital, and that winter of '45, we went down to OU, and both of us enrolled as students there.
What did she tell you when she saw you?
She told me I wrote well, and that she thought I had a talent for writing.
How long did you stay at OU? I mean, did you graduate from there?
Yeah.
And what did you do after you graduated? Where did you, what was your...
Very briefly, I couldn't find a job. Everybody was graduating at the same time. And, all the guys back were pouring out of the colleges. And I couldn't get a job as a reporter, which is what I wanted to be. And I got a job writing commercials for Low Runkle ad agency in Oklahoma City as a kind of a temporary tryout deal. I wrote Cane's Better Coffee commercials, Cane's Eggs Day Coffee, and Purina Pig Chow commercials for their morning newscasts. Meanwhile, I was trying to find a newspaper job, and I got a call after a couple of weeks from the Borger, Texas News Herald.
That was your first newspaper job? And how long were you with Borger?
Just until I could find a job, a better job on a better paper. That was a terrible paper.
What sort of things?
6 months. I was there from January, no, I was there from June, or middle of June, I guess, of 48 until the following winter, January. Yeah, that was as long as I stayed there. Now
What sort of things did you write for that paper?
everything. I was covered crime and violence mostly, and then everybody was leaving the paper as fast as they could find another job, and so I kept getting up again, moved over to the desk. Meanwhile, this Larry Grove, who I mentioned, and some other friends of mine from the University of Oklahoma had gone to work on the Lawton Morning Press, and they called me and said, "Come and join us." So I did.
And how long were you with that newspaper?
I was there till 50. The Morning Press was more or less went broke and was bought by the Constitution. I don't guess it went broke, but it became enough of a problem for the Constitution so that Ned Shepler bought it and merged it. He kept me on. Most of the guys were fired, but he kept me. But I didn't much want to stay, and I got an offer from the United Press in Oklahoma City, and I took it.
How long were you with the United Press? And Charlie told me that you became the bureau chief.
Yeah, I was
out here.
I was at Oklahoma City. I guess it was 50 I joined them. I covered the state capitol with Howard Wilson and did some other things. And then in 52, the bureau manager in Santa Fe became ill and resigned, and they offered me the bureau managership at Santa Fe, which I took.
And that's what brought you out here.
Yeah.
One more question before we leave Oklahoma City. Actually, two questions before we leave Oklahoma City. I know you did work with Mr. Carter Bradley. Was that in connection with the United Press?
Carter was the guy that hired me. Carter had a way of watching papers around the state and looking for people who were good writers, and then stealing them away from the papers. And I was one of the guys he stole. I must say I'm delighted that he did. Yeah, I learned a lot from Carter, and he had a good bunch. Howard Wilson and Phil Dessauer, who went off to become editorial chief of the Tulsa World, was there too. Taught me a lot about how to write.
I want to ask you one more question. I want to interject right here. We have both read Fly on the Wall. Is it about the Capitol in Oklahoma City?
Not really. The Capitol, the setting, the physical setting is the Capitol in Oklahoma City. But it could also be, apparently the same architect designed about 35 of the 50 state capitals. And I've had more people tell me that's the capital of Jefferson City, that's the capital of Pierre, South Dakota. They're all alike. But that's the setting I had in mind, except for the river. I was trying to make the city anonymous, but the incident, the crime, the ripoff was a fairly standard highway department political corruption ripoff. They did it in New Mexico. They probably did it in Oklahoma. They did it in Florida. You know.
I'm sure everybody that read that book did just exactly the way I did and said, that sounds familiar. That person sounds familiar. I know which one that is. I thoroughly enjoyed that book.
Well, I have a question. When you were at the Borger Papers, you covered the crime scene. Did this start to plant the seed for eventually when you began to write your novels? Did that spark an interest, or was it something that evolved over time?
I think it probably did, because it made you aware, as you tend not to be if you're a layman, of the ambiguity of crime. That nobody really puts on a black hat and says I'm a bad guy. Nearly everybody is basically has it rationalized so that they're decent and can live with themselves. And you begin becoming aware of that, which has always interested me.
Okay. By 1952, you were out here in New Mexico.
I got here in the fall of '52. Yeah.
Okay. And how long did you, were you the bureau chief out here? How long did you work with United Press out here?
I was bureau chief about a year and a half, and then they opened a bureau in Albuquerque, and I became New Mexico manager. And managing me and two other guys.
And you.
And then I, shortly thereafter, and partly because of this change, which I felt was impractical, I resigned from UP. So after about 2 years out here, I left them. And I went to work as a political writer for the Santa Fe, for the New Mexican in Santa Fe. And then that was in '54, I sort of moved up the scale and became finally editor in, I don't know what year it was.
When did you become associated with the University of New Mexico?
Okay, in '62, I actually joined the UNM in January 1, '63, but in '62, the guy that owned the paper, Robert McKinney, another Oklahoman from Cloud Chief, was ambassador to Switzerland. And I wrote him a letter in the summer and told him that I was giving him 6 months notice. I was going to leave the New Mexican in 6 months. And I went to University of Missouri and talked to, well, I'd written Earl English, the dean of the School of Journalism at Missouri. And he sent me a bunch of their papers there. They were professional papers. And asked me what I thought of them, and I wrote him back to him what I thought of them. He said he agreed exactly. And he offered me a job as managing editor of the newspaper. They have two papers, a student paper and a professional paper. I went back there and looked Columbia, Missouri, and noticed it didn't have any mountains or anything much, and decided that I didn't really want to go to Missouri very much. Meanwhile, the chairman of the journalism department at UNM had gotten wind that I was, and he contacted me, told me that we had a long talk, and I told him what I really want to do was go back and study English, and study all the stuff I'd missed that I hadn't taken in Oklahoma, and studied Chaucer and Shakespeare and Milton and modern poetry and all this stuff. And he said, well, he was going to retire pretty quick, and he would like to bring me down there and get me in a position, in effect, to replace him as chairman of the department. So I was invited down to talk to the president of the university. Well, the president of the university had been the target of the McCarthyite forces, and he had gone to the American Legion Convention, which were the real right-wingers in the state, as they were most places, and told them that he realized that some of them didn't really believe in the First Amendment, and wanted him to fire a bunch of professors who didn't agree with their political philosophy. And he thought it was his honorable thing for him to do, is tell them that the first thing they're going to have to do is fire him, because as long as he was there, they were going to have free speech at UNM. Well, I wrote this didn't set well with the American Legion. I wrote an editorial praising him for this, and it was the only praise he got from anywhere, so I guess it stuck in his mind. And anyway, to make a long story short, he offered me a job as an assistant, part-time job, so I could go to school down there, which I accepted.
And from that, when did you become the head of the department?
Journalism, about 3 years later.
Well, you worked fast.
Well, I had 5 children, and we adopted a 6th one when we got down here. So you have to be fast when you got that many kids.
I guess so. You had a large family to take care of. When and what was the first thing that you wrote in the way of? I know you write nonfiction as well as
Fiction.
your fiction, your novels. What was the first thing that you published in that?
In fiction?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I might have published a kind of a bad short story in a little magazine, but I don't think so. I think the first fiction ever published was The Blessing One, my first novel.
Which is an excellent novel. It's great. What about nonfiction? What was the first nonfiction?
Oh heck, I don't know. I can't remember. I was always freelancing on the side. You have to make a living in the newspaper business almost. In those days you did. Maybe they pay better now. Everything from film daily to whatever. I was always writing nonfiction on the side.
How long were you the department head of the school of
I
journalism?
guess I was chairman for 7 years.
I believe you're retired now. Is that right?
Yeah, I quit being chairman a long time before I retired. Well, you know how I don't know if you or not, but it's pretty much like chairmanships in most universities rotate 5 years and 3 years or 7 years or something, and nobody wants to be chairman. In most universities, it's really a job. It's just sort of thrust on you because you know. But I held it longer than I wanted to hold it. You're not paid much for it, and it's really an onerous job. But we didn't have anybody else who was willing to do it, so I did it 7 years, and then I got out of it.
How many different classes a semester did you teach? I mean,
While I was chairman,
while you were with the department.
even when I was chairman, there were times when I was teaching 4 classes, which is more than a full load now.
Sure is.
Have any of your students that you taught gone on to greater things or followed in your footsteps that you know of?
Oh, some of them right. I haven't kept too good a track of them. I get a letter now and then from all sorts of places. I just got back after New York. We had a book tour in France, and I was signing books in Toulouse in a big bookstore. And I see a guy in line, and I thought, hell, that guy looks familiar, and he was one of my former students writing in France. Michael Blake, who wrote Dances with Wolves, was in one of my classes.
That's interesting, isn't it?
I don't remember him very well. I do remember him. I don't remember him as I remember him more as a character than as a student. I certainly wouldn't make the claim that he learned anything from me. I suspect he knew it when he got there. He was a pretty well-established young fellow when he showed up.
One thing I didn't ask you about your military service, which I want to pick up, was what was your unit?
Oh, I was a private first class in the Company C, 410th Infantry of the 103rd Division. No very famous military units.
103rd Division. I neglected to ask you that, and I want to go back and pick that up now. When did the connection with the Navajo people, the New Mexican Indians out here, when did that happen?
I was first saw my first Navajos in 1945. They sent us home on a hospital ship in the summer of '45. War was still on. I got a convalescent furlough, 60-day. Well, I got a 30-day furlough, but I erased the 30 and typed in 60 and extended it. Got away with it barely. Came back to Oklahoma City. Didn't know anybody here. My mother was working, and so I started answering the help wanted ads. And hell, if you were warm, you'd get a job. Anyway, I got a job driving a truckload of drill stem, I believe it was, some kind of drilling equipment, up to north of Crown Point on a Navajo reservation from Oklahoma City, with a cane and a patch over one eye and walking with a cane. Anyway, when I'm north of Crown Point on this dirt road, all of a sudden in front of me appears a whole bunch of guys and one woman, as I recall, on horses. and they're carrying this paraphernalia, and they're dressed, as I recall, in part at least, some in ceremonially. I stopped and they went by, and I looked at them. I thought, boy, this is interesting. And so then I drove to the site where we were unloading the oil field equipment. I asked this. There was an old rancher who lived there. Came by to see what the hell was going on, and he said. Anyway, I asked him what this was. He told me it was he said some of those boys were back from the Marine Corps. The Navajos mostly went into the Marines, and some of them were back now, and their family was having an enemy way ceremony, a curing ceremony. And I said, could I go see that? And he said, well, they're friendly people if you don't get drunk and don't misbehave. Well, they wouldn't mind. He didn't think so. I saw a little bit of that ceremony. Not much, but it struck me as being extremely interesting. That was in 1945. I didn't know anything about it. I read a little bit about the Navajo, maybe. But then when I always wanted to come back to New Mexico. When the first time I saw it, and when it was 7 years past, Maria and I'd come out here after Maria and I were married, and we were working in Borger, and she was pregnant. We came out to Santa Fe one summer and spent a little time with the linotype operator. I always wanted to get back. It was 52, of course, before I did. We did permanently. Anyway, I brought back with me an interest in the Navajos and these other cultures. Abiding interest.
The marvelous way that you have woven the kind of information, the kind of sort of unspoken things in your books could not come just from reading. You had to have some association with these people long term. What was that, and how did that happen? And I know that's a
part of it happens
question.
like this. Well, it happens by making friends, among Navajo friends and Pueblo Indian friends. But the difference between my culture and childhood culture and the childhood culture of the Navajos is not nearly as different as a difference between my culture and the culture of the average English professor at the University of New Mexico. The Navajo and I are both born poor, both born rural, both born where if it rains you stay home because you can't get out because of the mud. Both born where you don't waste water because you pull it out of the well on a rope or you haul it in on a truck. Both born where you every morning the first thing you got to be looked at the sky because everything depended on whether it rained or not. Both born with a sense of being outsiders. See, the Navajo feels strange in Gallup. I felt strange in Kanawha. Felt like partly because being Catholics, we were this small little island of Catholicism surrounded by fundamentalist Protestants who thought we were strange indeed and probably dangerous. You know, and who would come on feast days, Christmas, and file into the church and stare at us, these pagan rites we were conducting. Did we really sacrifice babies on the altar? And there was a radio station in Capitol Hill who its only purpose was endless barrage of anti-Catholic propaganda. So I grew up with the same sense of being an outsider as these Navajos do, exactly. Also, as a little boy, when I'd go to my dad's store, I'd see these old timers sitting on the porch talking, and I became familiar with their attitude towards strangers, all this stuff. So when I walk up to a trading post, two gray hills or something, I know just exactly how to behave. I mean, these guys, I get a quick rapport with these Navajos. I go to a faculty cocktail party, and I feel I still, who are these guys? Born with a silver spoon out of their mouth, born knowing they're going to Philip Exeter Academy for their prep school. They're to Princeton, going to be a member of Bones. They're going to be fraternity boys. Hell, I never met a fraternity boy, even in my days in college. You know, I relate much better to these Navajos than I do to them.
It certainly shows in the book. I mean, you have such an incredible understanding. You don't even have to, You don't have to put it in words. It's there, and everybody that reads the books can pick up on that. I think it's
Also, they're religious people, and I'm a religious person. Not many Americans are religious. Or they're not. They might say they are. They might check the box saying they're a member
belongs
of
to
the
this
church,
denomination.
but
or
they
whatever.
don't let their religion in any way affect their lives. And the Navajos distinctly do.
Just curious, have you been adopted into the Navajo tribe?
They
or
don't have any
they don't
they
do
don't
that
have
sort
any
of
way of
thing?
doing that. The tribe is really a confederation of 60-something clans. You might get adopted into a clan, maybe. I don't know how they do that, but they did give me this plaque back here, the wooden plaque that
Mm-hmm.
declares me a special friend.
Special friend to the, and how do you properly pronounce D-I-N-E-H?
Dene.
Dene. Special friend to the Dene, awarded to Tony Hillerman by the Navajo Nation, September 12th, 1987. Excuse me. As an expression of appreciation and friendship for authentically portraying the strength and dignity of traditional.
Navajo culture.
Thank you. That's a lovely plaque.
It really is. I really like it.
Charlie said something to me about the fact that some of your books are probably, all of your works, that some of the schools, the Navajo schools, are requiring that
They
students read
use them.
those
They
books.
use them in their English courses as, for obvious reasons. They're about the same landscape these kids know, and they're about the people these kids know, and so they use them in their schools throughout the reservation. In fact, I think practically throughout the United States in Indian schools. There are not very many books about Indians.
No,
Certainly
there
that have
aren't.
Indians as the heroes.
That's true, and not like yours. And I know that you're published in so many countries, and I just discovered this, much to my chagrin. I should have known that. How many countries across the world are publishing your books now?
Starting in the north: Iceland, Finland, Norway, Sweden, that's 4, Denmark, Holland, Germany, Czechoslovakia, France, Spain, Italy, Portugal, Israel, Brazil, Japan, and of course through British interest, Australia and New Zealand. I may have left something out.
Anywhere in the Orient?
Japan, they're
Oh,
publishing
Japan.
Japanese.
And how are they doing it in terms of sales compared to the United States? I mean, where?
Well, I don't know. They seem to. I just got back from a book tour in France, and they just published Coyote Waits, and they were already in the second printing. And I gather from what I heard, I sell remarkably well in France. I don't know how well I sell in other countries, except I can tell only, you don't get, the reports you get are not very illuminating, frankly, but the advances I'm getting tend to be bigger, which indicate the publishers think they're selling more books.
We get a lot of requests at the Oklahoma Historical Society archives for Indian material from Germany. There seems to be a lot of interest in Indian material in Germany. Do the sales of your books reflect
I
that
think I
interest?
must sell well in Germany. I just signed a contract for my first book, Blessing Way, had been published by Goldman, which is the one of the two big German publishers, and I just signed a contract for republication. Their license to publish it ran out, and I just signed a contract for republication rights, and the advance was more than twice as big as the original publication right, which would indicate that it's selling well. Now all the rest of them are being published by Goldman's competitor, whose name slips me. Real hold. impression from them, again, based on just what I get from my agent, would indicate they're selling well.
That's great.
These are all, incidentally, this top row is, and I run out of space, is the mostly foreign editions.
That is terrific. Now, the Blessing Wave came out in the late 60s. Is that right? Is it like 68?
I think it came out in,
I was sitting here trying to remember
I think it came out in 69. It might have been
69.
70. Let me see, maybe it was 70. '1970, you're right.
Now I'm going to ask you one more question, because I know we've taken a lot of your time, which we really appreciate. But one thing I did not cover, and I do want to ask you, I do know that you were very, very strongly involved with and very instrumental in getting the medical school of the University of New Mexico underway, and I want to know about that.
Well, I think I'm giving somebody giving me credit I don't deserve. I was working when I came down to university. I went to work part-time for Popejoy. Popejoy was one of his big goals was get the medical school started, and I was involved in since I came from the state capital place where I knew all the politicians. I was involved in at a second level with the lobbying, but I certainly wasn't a key figure in any way.
Well, I was talking to Charlie, and Charlie is certainly a fan of yours, and he's such a dear man.
Isn't he,
and he was
though?
telling, yes, he is. And he's been a friend of my family and mine for
Did you
many
notice I
years.
dedicated this?
Yes, I did. I noticed that. When I saw it, I was very surprised because I didn't realize that he was related to you. And immediately I said, Charlie, I went in the store one day for something, and I heard him talking to another customer about the Great Taos bank robbery. And I immediately, my ears went, what? And then I read the dedication in the front of one of your books there. And we have interviewed Charlie twice because of his own life and because of the longevity of his family in Shawnee.
Family
And,
had quite
and he knows everything there is to know about Shawnee, Oklahoma, practically. It's just a wealth of information. I'm going to ask you one last question, and then we're going to let you rest. Of all these marvelous things that you have written, and certainly we are fans, and my mother is a great fan. Do you have a favorite?
Well, not exactly. Each book has got things I like about it and things I don't like about it. Each book's got its good points and bad points. But I guess probably the one, if I had to say one, the one that probably worked the best, it would be The Thief of Time.
I love that book. That was a great book. Now I know that a couple of your books have been sold. The movie rights have been sold to Robert Redford, and I know that they were filming The Dark Wind.
Right.
What is the other book that
Well, actually, he bought the rights to The Dark Wind, and he optioned the rights to all the others.
Ah, I see.
But unless he changed his mind, he told me he planned to make a sequence of 3, presuming this first one is any good and makes any money. And Thief of Time, and either The Ghost Way or Talking God.
Ah, wonderful. Oh, wonderful.
Or,
and I do know, I'm sorry.
or Skinwalkers, maybe. I'm not sure. He had those 3 in mind. Ghost Way, Skinwalkers, and Thief of Time.
Any one of them would work beautifully, just beautifully. I can certainly see why he was interested in them. And I know this too, because Charlie told me, I know that you played a role in The Dark Wind. Didn't they put you in front of the camera?
I was played the role of the warden, or deputy warden, I guess. Yeah, I had 3 lines, and I did them so well they cut them down to 2.
I hope that was an interesting experience working with it.
It was kind of interesting, but really, I've never been much of a movie fan. I mean, it's not my bag. I hope it does well.
Oh, I do
but,
too.
But it's not as, I was kind of taken aback at how important, the importance people attach to movies as compared to books.
It certainly has shifted. It wasn't that way always, certainly. but it has shifted in that direction, and television. I think they're influenced so easily by things like that. Is there, Bill, do you have a question?
Well, I was going to perhaps say that perhaps with the success of Dances with Wolves, that maybe the time is right for other major motion pictures of Native Americans depicting Native American culture, and this might prove to be a very successful venture. Perhaps the time has come for something like this, and I feel that it will be a success. I just wanted to ask, we briefly mentioned about your wife Marie. When did you marry?
We met in 47, when we were both seniors at the University of Oklahoma, and married in August of 48.
What was she majoring in?
She's a bacteriologist.
That's interesting. Now, Charlie didn't tell me that. What is she doing now? I mean, is she working somewhere now? Is she?
Well, she's not. Since we've been married, she's worked as a lab technician in bacteriology. She's taught endlessly, almost, largely as volunteer, but sometimes on a regular faculty, a good deal.
Did she ever teach at the university?
No.
Yeah, perhaps a hospital staff or
No,
a teaching
no.
hospital or
No,
something?
she taught mostly. She never taught in the biological field. She taught junior high school once in Texas, and then she taught for years. She's taught as a volunteer religion classes.
And how many children do you have now, Charlie? You mentioned, Tony,
We have
you
6.
mentioned 6. Yeah, and you have grandchildren too.
Yeah.
How many grandchildren do you have?
10.
My gosh. You look very healthy for a man who has 10 grandchildren.
Well,
When do you anticipate your newest book on Hillerman Country coming
Yes.
out?
Yes.
Hillerman Country is supposed to be shipped in September to the bookstores, and it'll supposed to be published officially in October. But before that, there'll be a book called The Best of the West, which is an anthology of nonfiction, mostly nonfiction, about the West. It's Book of the Month Club and HarperCollins publishing it jointly, I believe.
Do you plan on writing more novels about Lieutenant Joe and Officer Jim?
Yeah, I plan to write at least one more. I have one started, sort of started.
Good.
Well, you
We'll
leave
be
us
waiting
hanging.
for that.
Don't
Yeah.
don't just leave it at one.
Yeah, definitely don't just leave it at one. But we're glad to know that there will be other novels.
Our battery's about to go.
Okay.
so-
Is there anything that we haven't asked you that you would like to say, or anything we have not covered that is important to you?
No, I think you've done a good job covering everything. I can't think of it.
Excellent. Mr. Hillerman, we want to thank you so much
Well,
for your
sure.
time. We really, really appreciate it. This is going to make an excellent addition to our oral history program. We really appreciate it. And incidentally, we are going to interview Barney. We've got him on the string. Our photo archivist is going to talk to him, and probably one of us will go along because there's some things about Barney we want to know about.
Okay.
And anytime you're in Oklahoma City visiting, be sure we welcome you to come by the Historical Society archives. We enjoy your visit.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.